Have you ever wondered what it truly means to be a hero? Not the kind you see in movies with capes and superpowers, but the real kind. The kind that walks among us, often unseen, unheard, their stories held in the quiet confidence of those who knew them best. Today we're going to talk about a man like that. A man whose name you might not know, but whose story you will never forget. Nicholas Checque. A name that for a long time was known only to a select few. A member of the most elite fighting force on the planet, SEAL Team 6. He was a man who lived in the shadows, who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, and who in one final selfless act reminded us all of the profound cost of freedom. To understand the man, you have to understand where he came from. Nicholas David Checque was born on March 5, 1984, in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Pittsburgh. It was a place where roots ran deep, where communities were close-knit, and where the values of hard work and humility were instilled from a young age. The America of Nick Checque's childhood was one of relative peace, a nation basking in the afterglow of the Cold War's end. The specter of large-scale conflict seemed, for a time, to have receded into the history books. For a young boy growing up in this environment, the world was full of possibilities. And from a very early age, Nick was a doer, a striver. He wasn't the kind of kid to sit still. He was active, energetic, with a competitive fire that burned brightly. He wrestled, he played football, he was a swimmer and a runner. He was, by all accounts, a quintessential American boy. But even then, there was something different about him. A focus, a determination that set him apart. His sister, Ashley, remembers that he wasn't the type to play army in the backyard or wear camouflage to the mall. His ambition was more serious, more deeply felt. From as early as the 7th grade, Nick Checque knew what he wanted to be. He wanted to be a Navy SEAL. It was a dream that seemed almost impossibly distant, a world away from the tree-lined streets of his hometown. His friends, in the way that friends do, would point out the odds. They'd tell him how hard it was, how few men actually make it through the brutal training. 1 in 5, they'd say. But Nick's family, they never doubted him. "I thought you have no idea who this kid is," his sister recalled. "He will make it and then some." He was an everyday warrior. This wasn't just a fleeting teenage fantasy. It became the organizing principle of his young life. He joined the Sea Cadets in high school. He calculated, with a maturity beyond his years, how to forge himself into the kind of man who could withstand the legendary rigors of Bud-S basic underwater demolition SEAL training. He started taking cold showers, a small daily act of self-imposed hardship. He moved his bed into a closet, seeking discomfort, training his mind to overcome his body's complaints. On a chilly Pennsylvania day, you might see him in shorts, forgoing a jacket, not out of bravado, but as a silent personal test of his resolve. And then, in his senior year of high school, the world changed. The date was September 11th, 2001. The Twin Towers fell, the Pentagon burned, and a field in Shanksville, not so far from his own home, became a scar on the American landscape. For a generation of young men and women, the abstract concept of service suddenly became a concrete and urgent calling. For Nick Checque, it was the final galvanizing moment. His quiet, personal ambition now had a powerful public purpose. There was just one problem. To become a SEAL, you needed 20/20 vision. Nick didn't have it. For many, that would have been the end of the dream, but for Nick, it was just another obstacle to be overcome. While still a teenager, he insisted on corrective eye surgery. He would not be denied. In 2002, at the age of 18, just a few months after graduating from Norwin High School, where he'd maintained an unfashionably short military-style haircut, Nicholas Checque enlisted in the United States Navy. The quiet boy from Pennsylvania, with the unwavering gaze and the iron will, was on his way. The first chapter of his life was over. The next would be written in the crucible of the world's most demanding military training. The path to becoming a Navy SEAL is often described as a journey to hell and back. It is a physical and psychological ordeal designed to strip a man down to his very core, to find the breaking point, and then to push him beyond it. For Nick Checque, this journey began on October 22, 2002. After basic training, he was sent to Dam Neck, Virginia for intelligence specialist training. It was a vital skill, but it wasn't the end goal. The real test began in April 2003 in Coronado, California, with Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training, or BUD-S, Class 245. For the next 6 months, Nick and his classmates were subjected to a relentless barrage of physical and mental stress. They ran for miles in the soft sand, their boots heavy with water. They swam in the frigid Pacific, their bodies aching with cold. They were deprived of sleep, pushed to the limits of exhaustion, and constantly reminded that the easiest way out was to quit, to ring the bell 3 times and walk away. During what is known as Hell Week, 5.5 days of continuous training with a maximum of 4 hours of sleep in total, the dropout rate skyrockets. Men suffer from hypothermia, fractures, and sheer soul-crushing exhaustion. This is where the boys are separated from the men, where the true measure of a man's will is taken. Nick Checque did not quit. He wrote letters home, his words a testament to his unyielding spirit. He sent his family photos of his cuts and bruises, not as complaints, but as badges of honor, proof that he was enduring, that he was moving forward. The boy who had taken cold showers in his Pennsylvania home was now a man being tested by the relentless cold of the Pacific Ocean, and he was passing the test. In February 2004, he graduated from BUD-S. He had done what so many had told him was impossible. He was a Navy SEAL, but the training wasn't over. He went on to basic airborne training at Fort Benning, Georgia, and then completed SEAL qualification training in August 2004. Finally, Petty Officer Checque was assigned to his first command, SEAL Team 10, based in Little Creek, Virginia. He was no longer a trainee, he was an operator, a member of one of the most respected special operations units in the world. He was now at war. The mid-2000s were a period of intense operational tempo for the SEAL teams. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were raging, and the demand for elite special operators was at an all-time high. Nick Checque deployed multiple times to both theaters. These were years shrouded in the secrecy that defines the world of special operations. The details of his missions, the successes, the failures, the close calls, these are stories that are rarely told, known only to the men who were there with him. But we know this: he distinguished himself. He was a warrior through and through. His job was his livelihood, his calling. But he also developed a remarkable ability to compartmentalize. His sister Ashley recalled, when he was done with work, he got in his car and came home. And when he was home, it was amazing. He shielded his family from the grim realities of his profession, from the risks he took on a daily basis. He wanted them to know the son and the brother, not the warrior. His performance and his character did not go unnoticed. In the world of naval special warfare, there is an even more elite, more secretive unit, a unit that takes the best of the best. It's officially known as the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, or DevGRU, but the world knows it by another name, SEAL Team 6. In October 2006, just 2 years after joining his first team, Nick Checque was selected for DevGRU. This was the pinnacle, the unit responsible for the nation's most sensitive and dangerous missions. the unit that would, a few years later, find and kill Osama bin Laden. Joining SEAL Team 6 meant entering an even deeper world of shadows. His life became a cycle of intense, realistic training and high-stakes deployments. He was surrounded by men who were, in every sense of the word, the quiet professionals. They were masters of their craft, humble in their demeanor, and absolutely lethal in their application of violence. Nick Checque fit right in. One of the little-known details about his time in the teams is the depth of his intellectual curiosity. A teammate would later remember him not just as a shooter, but as a deep thinker. They would have long discussions, and it was clear to those who knew him that beneath the warrior's exterior was a man with tremendous potential, a man who could have excelled at anything he chose to do in life. He seemed invincible, and his friends, his teammates, they wished with all their hearts that he had been. December 2012, Afghanistan. The war had been raging for over a decade. The initial conventional phase was long over. Now it was a war fought in the shadows, a war of night raids, intelligence gathering, and lightning-fast strikes against a determined and elusive enemy. For the men of SEAL Team 6, this was their domain. They were the tip of the spear, the force called upon when the stakes were at their highest, when failure was not an option. On December 5th, 2012, an American aid worker named Dr. Dilip Joseph was returning from a rural medical clinic near Kabul. Dr. Joseph worked for a nonprofit organization called Morning Star Development, a group dedicated to helping Afghan communities rebuild. Suddenly, his vehicle was stopped by men armed with AK-47s. He and two of his Afghan colleagues were taken captive by the Taliban. For 4 days, Dr. Joseph was a prisoner. He was marched for hours into the remote, snow-dusted mountains of Laghman province. He was held in a small one-room building, his future uncertain, the threat of torture and execution a constant, terrifying presence. He would later write about these days, about the chilling fear, but also about the strange human moments he shared with his captors, seeing them not as monsters, but as men. Back at Bagram Airfield, the American military was working around the clock. Intelligence assets were focused on one thing: finding the hostages. And the intelligence that came back was grim. The Taliban were planning to move Dr. Joseph possibly across the border into Pakistan. If that happened, the chances of a successful rescue would plummet to near zero. Worse, there were indications that his life was in imminent danger. The window of opportunity was closing, and it was closing fast. General John Allen, the top U.S. commander in Afghanistan, made the call. A rescue mission was authorized. The task was given to the unit best equipped to handle it, SEAL Team 6. The men who were chosen for this mission were all volunteers. They knew the risks. A nighttime raid on a fortified enemy compound in mountainous terrain is one of the most dangerous operations in modern warfare. The chances of a firefight were almost certain. The chances of casualties were high. Petty Officer First Class Nicholas Checque, now 28 years old, a seasoned veteran of countless missions, was one of those volunteers. In the pre-dawn hours of December 8th, under the cover of darkness, the SEALs boarded their helicopters. They flew deep into enemy territory, the silence of the night broken only by the rhythmic thumping of the rotor blades. After a 5-hour hike through the punishing Afghan wilderness, they arrived at a position overlooking the compound where Dr. Joseph was being held. The plan was for a swift, surgical assault. But as the team crept closer, a Taliban sentry, a lone guard in the courtyard, spotted them. He raised the alarm and darted back into the target building. The element of surprise was gone. In that split second, the entire mission changed. The carefully laid plans evaporated. Now it was a race against time. The SEALs knew that the alerted guards would likely kill the hostage. There was no time for caution, no time for a methodical approach. There was only time for action. What happened next is a testament to the incredible courage and training of these men. The official Navy Cross citation, an award second only to the Medal of Honor, describes the final moments of Nick Checque's life. But to truly understand it, you have to read between the lines of the formal military language. As the team sprinted toward the building, Nick Checque was the point man. He was out front. He was the first in the line of fire. He saw a guard peer from the doorway and engaged him. He knew with absolute certainty that the hostage's life was hanging by a thread. And so, as the citation reads, unhesitatingly, he sprinted to the door and made entry. As Nick Checque burst through the doorway, a doorway that was actually just layers of thick wool blankets cemented into the frame, a makeshift design they'd never encountered before, he was met with a hail of gunfire, an AK-47 at close range. He was mortally wounded, but his charge, his sacrifice had created an opening. It had drawn the enemy's fire. It had given his teammates the precious seconds they needed. Senior Chief Petty Officer Ed Byers, who was right behind Nick, followed him through the breach. He engaged and killed an enemy fighter. Another SEAL followed, and then another. The room erupted in a chaotic, violent, close-quarters gun battle. Byers, unsure of where the hostage was in the darkness, threw himself on top of a man on the floor, shielding him with his own body while simultaneously pinning another Taliban fighter to the wall with his hand. The man he was shielding was Dr. Joseph. Within seconds, it was over. All 5 Taliban guards were dead. Dr. Joseph was safe, unharmed. The mission was a success, but the cost was immense. As the team flew back to Bagram, they did everything they could to save their fallen comrade. They worked on him desperately in the back of the helicopter, but his wounds were too severe. Petty Officer First Class Nicholas Checque was gone. In the world of special operations, the loss of a teammate is a deeply personal and painful event. These men form bonds that are forged in shared hardship and mortal danger. They are more than colleagues. They are brothers. The news of Nick's death was delivered to his family in the way that no family ever wants to receive it. A knock on the door in the early morning hours. A group of somber-faced soldiers on the doorstep. His sister Ashley was the first to know. She was the first person on his next of kin list. The months that followed were a blur of paperwork, arrangements, and a grief so profound it was difficult to put into words. His teammates, his brothers in arms, told the family that though they had lost Nick, the mission had been a success. It was a hard pill to swallow. How do you balance the life of a loved one against the success of a mission, no matter how important? The story of Nick Checque's heroism for a time remained largely in the shadows, just as he had lived his life. The mission was classified. The details were not made public. He was posthumously promoted to Chief Petty Officer and awarded the Navy Cross, but the ceremony was private. There was no fanfare, no public announcement. It was only later, when his teammate, Ed Byers, was awarded the Medal of Honor for his own incredible bravery in that same dark room, that the full story of Nick Checque's sacrifice came to light. Byers, in his speech at the White House, made sure the world knew who the first man through the door was. He lived his life as a warrior, Byers said of Nick. He carried out countless missions selflessly and fearlessly. He paid the ultimate sacrifice that day. But even as his heroism was being recognized, a debate began to surface in some corners of the media and the public sphere. It was a controversy that had nothing to do with Nick's courage, but everything to do with the circumstances of the mission itself. The organization Dr. Joseph worked for, Morning Star Development, described itself as a faith-based group. This led some to question whether it was appropriate to risk the lives of elite special operators to rescue an individual who, they argued, had willingly placed himself in a dangerous situation, potentially as part of a mission to spread his religious beliefs. One retired Air Force officer wrote on a blog, "Why are we risking the lives of our Special Forces personnel to rescue an evangelical team? Why should brave Americans risk their lives to bail their asses out when they go into tribal lands where they're not welcome?" It was a complex and uncomfortable question. On one hand, there is the long-standing American principle of not leaving a citizen behind, regardless of the circumstances. On the other, there are legitimate questions about the role of private aid organizations in conflict zones and the responsibility they bear for the safety of their personnel. Morningstar Development, for its part, strongly denied any implication that they were engaged in proselytizing, stating that their strategic objective was to help the people of Afghanistan through economic and community development initiatives. This debate, however, is a sideshow to the central truth of the story. For the men on the ground, for Nick Checque and his teammates, none of that mattered. They had a mission. An American citizen was in danger, and it was their job to save him. The politics, the debates, the questions of why, those were for others to argue about later. In the moment, there was only the mission. There was only the man they had to save. And for Nick Checque, there was only the door that he had to go through. He did not hesitate. He did not weigh the political implications. He did his duty. He gave his life for a fellow American. It was as simple and as profound as that. The story of Nicholas Checque is more than just the story of a single heroic act. It is a story that speaks to the very character of a nation and to the nature of the quiet, unseen sacrifices that are made every day to keep that nation safe. His death was a tragedy. For his family, it was a wound that will never fully heal. For his community in Western Pennsylvania, it was a stark reminder of the cost of the long wars that had been fought in their name. Nick was the third graduate from Norwin High School to be killed in action in Iraq or Afghanistan since 2007. 3 young men from one small town, their futures extinguished in faraway lands. But Nick's story also has a powerful and enduring significance. It reminds us that the truest form of heroism is often the quietest. It is not about seeking glory or recognition. It is about a deep and abiding sense of duty, a commitment to the person on your left and the person on your right, and a willingness to put the safety of others before your own. Dr. Dilip Joseph, the man Nick Checque died to save, has spoken of the profound debt he feels. He knows that he is alive today because a group of brave men he had never met, were willing to risk everything for him. He has dedicated himself to honoring their sacrifice, to living a life worthy of the price that was paid. The legacy of Nick Checque is not just in the medals he was awarded or in the stories of his bravery. It is in the quiet moments of reflection he inspires. It is in the Gold Star families who find solace in knowing their loved ones are not forgotten. It is in the young man or woman from a small town somewhere in America who hears his story and is inspired to serve a cause greater than themselves. Nick Checque did not live to be 30 years old, but in his short life he lived with more purpose and more courage than most people do in a lifetime. He was a warrior, a deep thinker, a son, a brother, and a hero. And his story, now that it has been told, deserves to be remembered. There's a quote often attributed to the ancient Greek historian Thucydides that says, "The secret to happiness is freedom, and the secret to freedom is courage." Nicholas Checque was a man who understood this in his very bones. He chose a life of courage so that others could live a life of freedom. He lived in the shadows so that we could live in the light. And in his final selfless act, he became a part of a long, unbroken line of American heroes who have given their last full measure of devotion. His name may not be written in the history books that our children will study in school, but for those who knew him and for those who know his story, his legacy is etched in something far more permanent, in the quiet gratitude of a nation and in the enduring power of a life lived with honor, with courage, and with love. He was the hero we never knew we had, and he is the hero we should never forget. We're done for today. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, smash the like button, comment below, and hit subscribe for more great content coming your way soon.